Hello.
One last turn around REM World. You're listening to About Buildings and Cities. I'm Luke Jones.
I'm George Kinjal.
We're on to XL. We're excelling. It's the final chapter of our treatment of SML XL, the classic early 90s Rem Koolhaas.
I mean, I think this book actually came out just about in the second half of the 90s.
Yeah.
So early meaning
Mid.
one of the ages before either of us felt very grown up.
Yes.
Marginally. If we were a few years older, you might have actually been in the sort of household where you might have been conscious of this thing coming out.
No. I heard about it at university. It was where it was recommended. It was very enthusiastically recommended by all and sundry.
Really?
Yeah. Odd. I wonder
Nobody
what they
has
thought.
ever recommended me this book.
I wonder what they thought we were going to get out of it. Yeah.
Nobody's ever recommended me this book.
Yeah.
Like, I would be recommended Ala Rossi's Architecture of the City.
Oh, okay.
Which
yeah.
also, I would struggle to think of what anyone would
I
get
think
out
you
of
were
it.
more in line with the hair shirt brigade.
Yeah.
Quite a
I'm
hair
quite
shirt to start
that way
with.
inclined
Yeah.
in... I like nice buildings. Actually,
Yeah.
I get a lot of pleasure out of that bit. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. So anyway, XL is the urbanism section, broadly defined, of the book, and it's also the longest section. There is more XL than there is anything else, but it's probably the least read bit because people start at the beginning. Certainly, there's lots of stuff in here which I had never looked at, having begun reading this book
there's only
several
one
times.
person I know who's really seriously endeavoured to read SMLXL.
Yeah.
That's you.
Yeah.
I don't know anyone else, so I really couldn't comment on how... I mean, you say that. Do you know anyone who's read this book? Made a serious effort to read this book?
I don't know. I mean, it's not the kind of question I've really asked in a kind of broad way. Let us know if you've read it.
I mean, some people... I'm sure some people have.
And
but
if
you say
so-
it's
if
the
so,
list. I think we're
how
pulling from
much
a sample of one.
A lot of the stuff that we looked at in the earlier chapters, I was quite familiar with the buildings and I had thoughts about them. And then there's lots of stuff in this which I was looking at for the first time because I realised I'd read the very end, the PS, and I'd read the
Something
beginning
like
3/4.
18 years ago, you told me that the projects in L were
Yeah.
some of the best things anyone had ever designed.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
And you were very excited about them.
They are good. Well, I mean, I've nailed my colours to the mast on those ones. Yeah, but then I think I must not have really got past those ones. So, least familiar. Also, if the book as a whole tends to present the projects sometimes in a way that slightly obscures concretely what they actually are as a building proposal, like that tendency is turned up several notches further in XL, where yes, I would just there are certainly 2 or 3 other projects which could fairly be described as pure vibes.
Yeah.
Where there is actually a real master plan somewhere behind there, but it's very hard to understand what it is from its presentation in the book.
Sort of. As we go through, I might challenge how real some of these master plans really are.
A real master,
It's certainly more real than presented.
a real piece of design that someone paid for.
Yes, there's some real... He produced some real pieces of paper with real lines on them.
People really did pay for. But how much further than that you can go, I don't know.
XL also has probably the greatest distinct identity.
Interesting.
For me, the beginning, as we enter the beginning of the book, it's got a kind of building up grain.
Yeah.
And then it gets into a flow. And the flow of building projects and essays about buildings kind of run all through.
Yeah.
And in fact, they're a little jumbled. But I would say nearly all of these projects, there's one exception which I don't think really belongs in this section actually, are not building designs.
Yeah.
And they are either about the space in between buildings,
Yeah.
or where other people will build buildings, the volume with which they will build them, and discussions about how cities grow up. And that's quite a different sort of thing to the other sections of the book.
Yeah.
And it also... I don't know if this section is more wordy than other sections, but it, in terms of the way the different balance of word and text.
Yeah.
But I think it, in terms of its comprehensibility, leans more than some of the other sections, relies more than some of the other sections on the written word, because a lot of what he's talking about is quite conceptual and at one level removed from the design of buildings, because it doesn't prescribe what the design of buildings will be. And it's engaged a lot with also him as a viewer.
Yeah.
There's a lot of looking at stuff and they're not saying something he sort of sees or doesn't see, but not really necessarily. The proposals aren't, it isn't kind of totally clear sometimes what the connect is.
Yeah. Yeah, for me, L is the sweet spot where it's quite architectural, but it's also quite, there's space for some quite out there ideas. In this one, I feel like we're just floating in a kind of free improvisational sort of beboppy space of provocation, which actually I bounce off quite hard. But maybe we should get into the detail of what it really is, and we can probably frame it by talking about this essay, which is about a third of the way through, or which is called "Whatever Happened to Urbanism," which is another of these Koolhaas architecture culture sort of backbiting kind of essays. There are lots and lots of references to contemporary currents in theory, architecture, chat, what's going on at the various sort of high cultural and academic high tables that he's sort of invited to, and why they're all wrong and it doesn't really matter and that kind of thing.
I felt by the time that I'd read this essay, we've had a bit of a gap in the recording between this and the last part 3, but I felt like I'd read this essay already when I read it, because it's so many of the elements of it he said in other essays in this, and most essays he wrote in the period he did not include in this book.
Yeah.
So nearly every bit of design he did in this period, I think, goes into the book.
Yeah.
But a lot of writings didn't. But even within the range of the writings that did go into the book, I feel that he's beginning to wax the same themes in different configurations.
Yeah.
By this stage.
So the core theme here is that there was this sort of background condition when he was a child of sort of modernist planning, modernist theories of urbanism were almost sort of the overwhelming approach to planning in the immediate post-war period. Lots of big buildings with big spaces between them, lots of boxes, lots of motorways, lots of infrastructure, lots of big green spaces, bringing fresh air into the city and all of this kind of thing, functional separation and all that kind of thing.
It was a moment when I think never in history before or since has there been such a close to a sort of accepted paradigm of looking at urban building.
There had been this sort of postmodern turn, and the thing about postmodern urban theory is that it's very acclaimed, but very little of it is actually built. Like there's the ratio of like postmodern urban theorizing to actual like postmodern urbanism is quite kind of the opposite way around, isn't it? Like an enormous amount of modernist city planning actually got done and got built, often with like relatively little sort of theorization about exactly how and why. But then, you get your kind of Colin Rowe collage city. You get your Aldo Rossi. You get all of these books, kind of, and all of this sort of concentration of academic interest on the sort of the virtues of the traditional dense city. But in a way,
it's about conservation. Is the kind of
So there's a bit of
I would say
there's a bit of conservation, but there's very hard. But like, there's not a lot of turning the ship around in terms of how new bits of city are actually built.
I mean, a lot of that stuff is almost responding against the idea of building in a kind of completely new way, isn't it?
Some of it is, yeah.
Yeah, like...
Well, I mean, some of it, yeah, but it's like hard to have an architectural theory which is entirely against building. Like,
I mean, this is a different thing, but I would say I'm not sure that its influence has been particularly great, but I think a lot of it has gone into planning departments and development control. Yeah, ideas around controlling development.
Yes,
kind of. Suppose I think it's more of a model of kind of gardening than.
Yeah, and a bit of the kind of the contextualism of individual architectural responses and that kind of thing.
Yeah,
but
that's where the real.
I mean, he's got some zingers in the essay. For urbanists, the belated rediscovery of the virtues of the classical city at the moment of their definitive impossibility may have been the point of no return. And he kind of likens the sort of disconnect between the reality of what's going on in cities and the kind of conversations people having in urbanism to doctors in discussing the medical intricacies of an amputated limb.
Yeah, which is a fun line.
It's
and
a fun.
The more you think about it, like a lot of this stuff, actually, what you need is the velocity of reading the piece, and it is funny and provocative and gets you thinking. Yeah. But then if you analyse anything, it's not really like that, is it?
Well, they obviously are still doing something, aren't they? The professionals of the city are like chess players who lose to computers. Very 90s reference. A perverse automatic pilot outwits all attempts at capturing the city. I mean, I think there is something there which is like the activity of building an urbanism and like the kind of creation of urban area in a large, complicated 21st century capitalist society, or 20th century as it was then, does seem a bit out of control sometimes. Like it's not something which is really obviously.
Hasn't that always been true? The only point when it's not true is when that seems not true is when when the government is going like, we're going to do exactly this.
We're going to do everything.
And then as soon as people move in, the control disintegrates.
Yeah.
The multitudes contain multitudes.
The multitudes contain yes. But that's really the kind of the theme of it is stop worrying about designing the city so much and just try and live and, vibe in the chaos. Love the chaos. Surf the wave.
So I think you've been a bit closer in your heart to this guy. In this section, he brings up a few times this notion that like the West is being held back by its self-hatred and neurosis.
Yeah.
Or the city is.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that's going to drag us down. We're probably not going to abandon that, and probably we're going to live in a dystopia. But if we abandon that, we might not live in a dystopia.
Or just a museum, yeah.
Yeah, but like it's true of Singapore as well. He thinks Singapore's got it.
Yeah.
But there it's going to be a sort of banal dystopia.
Yeah.
Whatever. What do you think he thinks is the self-hatred? And what do you think he thinks would be better than it?
What do you mean by the self-hatred? What he talks about is a kind of pervasive attitude of like dissatisfaction with the city as it actually exists among the people who study and propose to design it. That there's a sort of sense of endlessly kind of critiquing its shortcomings rather than deeply understanding why it is the way it is and how its potential could be sort of maximised. I guess in the case of sort of postmodern sort of historicist, like new urbanist type people, that's about this sort of nostalgia for a now straightforwardly unavailable Baroque city or wherever it is, like there's a reason why the sort of possibility of building the kind of cities of the 18th or early 19th century, it's sort of not really available.
Yeah, I understand all of that, although I disagree with it. But, he points out that these people aren't doing anything.
Yeah.
I actually think he underestimates their influence. It was part of something that sort of set the political tone, which then left us where we are now. But he has this notion that like we've just got to get over ourselves, I feel.
Yeah.
And then it's all going to be great. I think something that's changed since this point is that the afterglow of modernism has shrunk.
Yeah.
And it now looks much more like that modern moment was an exception.
Staging of uncertainty. Lighten up. Surf the big wave of chaos and have fun with it.
Do you think he's arguing there for like, what we should do is like compulsory purchase and demolish loads of stuff and then just build a whim on it?
I just think he's not arguing for a specific thing. Well, let's just look at some projects.
Let's go. Cool.
So there are two actually completed master planning schemes in the book, and one of them isn't in, or that they did at this time, and one isn't in the book. That's that one, is it IJ Pline or something? Mm-hmm. Anyway, not in the book because it's by a different partner. The first one that he shows is this one for a housing estate called Bijlmer or something like that. Bijlmer, which is a big 60s panel. Is it panel built, I think?
I couldn't tell you from that picture. I'm not sure from that picture, actually.
But they're big kind of... it's set out on a sort of hexagonal grid. They are very large.
Yeah, if you imagine Parkview in Sheffield, which is perpetually being... Is that the name of it?
Park Hill.
Park Hill. If you just clone stamp that sort of 6 or 8 times.
Without the benefit of the Sheffield landscape to make it kind of interesting.
Yes, flat.
Yes, that's what you've got. And it's outside... Is it outside Rotterdam or is it Amsterdam? I think, yeah. Yeah, so this is a mid-80s project. They
Well, first he writes an essay about it in 76, which is included in the book, just after it had been built.
Yeah.
So it's kind of finished kind of late.
Yeah.
Right at the end. And it's very, very big. In
Quite
the
quick.
first essay, he is saying, maybe it's going to be all right if we can just get over the idea that it's horrible.
People did build some really funny ones. There's I went to visit one outside Geneva, where there's one that's like literally a kilometre long, kind of mega. They're kind of mega structures, but without very much interesting going on. They're just like banal mega structures.
Yes, more structures, like just more of it.
Yeah,
Could we just have some more?
Yeah, let's go big. Let's keep the diagram nice and simple.
And just do more and more. More and more and more.
Its story is the story of failed big welfare state housing estates everywhere, really, isn't it? Like, lots of people there are poor. There are social problems associated with it. Its reputation suffers. There is physical degradation of the housing and infrastructure. Also, perhaps doesn't work terribly well as a neighbourhood. And so, yeah, they have an opportunity to propose a way of rehabilitating it, which he characterises as programmatic bombardment. There's a lot of talk about programme. Programme is one of the key Koolhaas words. And programme literally means what the use of the building is, right? Like, what is the function of the space? But in the kind of OMA vocabulary, program is something which you can sort of manipulate, like paint with a palette knife or something. It's this, it's this like solid mass.
Because what he, I think, is talking about is, this is the trick that he's tried to do a lot. Okay, we need all of these activities. And they all need an amount of space here.
Yeah.
And the way in which we combine them together is the key thing that he's interested in. And essentially what he wants to do is to bring stuff in close proximity with attention. And really, if there's one thing that SMLXL is about, it's actually about lots of things. It's a very big and complex and contradictory book. But one driving force is the idea that we're going to get multiple different activities, bring them in close proximity to each other, but keep them separate.
Stimulation and excitement, yes.
Before we talk about what he proposes to do to this estate, we can say what he liked about it at the beginning, which is that it is massive and powerful because of its sort of scale. Yeah. The other thing he obviously likes about it is that it's very unpopular.
Yes.
And he wants to be contrarian. Offers boredom on a heroic scale. Its monotony, its harshness, its brutality. It is ironically refreshing.
Yes.
It no doubt presents to all categories of its inhabitants difficulties, problems, some which are insurmountable.
Yeah.
This is a good thing.
Yeah.
All the way through this section, when reading the writing, you're like, you are really pushing the boundary of how silly what you can say is. And this sad underground shopping mall where all the shops are closed and this giant field of mud with a viaduct going through it is honestly horrible.
Yes.
And honestly horrible with heroic scale is infinitely preferable to boringly nice.
Yeah.
I guess.
So the idea basically is of the proposal is create this sort of exciting carpet across the site. Keep all or certainly most of the existing blocks and maybe even add some other ones. I think they fill in one or two extra ones to heighten it a bit. I think these sort of start to close a little bit. And then, there's loads and loads of different activities and with like a bit of interesting vertical layering of them on top of each other, like a sort of carpet of sports and shopping and transport and other things going on. And all of that kind of thing. I guess what I mean by the way that he talks about program is it's quite abstract and it's also like weirdly, given that the urban theory is all about like love the chaos, it is sort of also weirdly directed, weirdly like dirigiste, but like first of all, like program is not really fungible and people are not very controllable. And you can't really just sort of sculpt it like you would sort of sculpt the pouche of the building. It's a utopian
society. It's when we were talking about, it made me think about Zamyatin's We.
Yeah.
Right, now it's sex hour.
Everyone's off for sex hour.
But now it's the music factory. What was in the estate before, there are these big sort of semi-hexagonal blocks and landscaping, which is lakes and trees. And he regards this, and the cars are sort of separated off. And he thinks of this as puritanical and anti-fun.
Yeah.
And the maneuver is overwhelmingly concentrated on the landscape, and it's to bring the cars up to the buildings
Yeah.
to make it more convenient, and then chop up the landscape into lots of activities instead of landscape, like shopping and playing tennis, and really reduce the amount of park, which he thinks is a sort of
pickleball.
Spending money.
Shopping.
Spending money,
a bit of alfresco
stuff.
Sexual intercourse, probably.
Picnics, that sort of thing. And his proposal is to generate that, is just to put places for it. And the other thing is there shouldn't be any of this sort of meandering parks. Paths go from place to place.
Yeah, I find it relatively convincing as a sort of proposal. Make it all a bit more fun. Make it all a bit more dense. The kind of reflexive modernist love of like not very nice parks everywhere. Is a genuine sort of pathology.
But don't you think that this would just be all of these things wouldn't actually work?
What is that? Is that big football pitch? That big kind of astro football pitch? Like, yeah, it can work.
It could work. Yeah.
It can work. Actually, lots of those are full of people all the time. I mean, the shopping mall might fail for the same reason that the existing shopping mall has failed, or it might not. It's not really in the gift of the.
It feels a bit like Le Corbusier's proposals, doesn't it? And it feels a bit like...
Except instead of the ground condition being Jardin Anglais, it's fun programme.
But his ones weren't all Jardin Anglais. They were people's allotments and sports facilities and things. They're all there in urbanism, aren't they?
A bit, yeah.
And like strange train lines that bring... I mean, he was a bit of a Puritan and wanted everyone to be a monk, but...
Yeah. But the basic like ground condition of like the city of 3 million and things like that is beautiful rustic nature, sort of quasi-rustic landscape nature, which this very much isn't. This is very much a landscape of fun. Yeah, I don't know.
A bit like Stratford, the post-Olympic park.
Yeah. Yes, yeah. Which, I think is relatively successful.
Yeah, it would be nice if they tried it. We would see if it worked. It would probably work a lot better than doing nothing.
By a strange twist of fate, then a big bit of the estate was annihilated in a plane crash, and therefore the project didn't go any further.
Well, I thought the project didn't go any further because they couldn't really do it, and then the plane crash happened quite well afterwards.
Yeah, I'm not sure how true the chronology is or not, but it's one of those kind of little quirks of history that the book tends to make quite a lot of. When did they crash the plane into it? 1992. It was a 747. Gosh, it's considered the worst accident in Dutch aviation history. Well, so anyway, let's keep going.
Yeah, I don't think we've kind of done it justice, but that's because in a way it's completely incomprehensible from the book. It ends on the tone that, like, left on its own, this thing is going to get demolished and destroyed and become hopeless. And I'm not sure that's actually happened, has it?
No, I think it's still there.
It's still there and probably...
But I'm not sure how much it's changed. But yeah, it's still there. And I think there have been kind of continuing projects here and there to do a mixture of demolition, rehabilitation and new building and that kind of thing. It's quite a long Wikipedia article about it, which I don't intend to get my head around. Okay, and then what we were going to...
So, South Point...
Yeah.
Which is the next section. What on earth is this about?
Yeah.
What was the cause for doing this project?
Project for redesigning Holland.
As in, who's he doing this for?
Yeah, I don't understand this one. So this is some kind of conceptual project about how you could fit all the people in Holland into different sized cities or something.
Yes, if you put all the people in the Netherlands into a density of Manhattan and drew it along the border, it would be a thin line of people along the border.
Yeah.
But if it was only the density of Los Angeles,
yes,
it would be a thicker line.
This is, this is one where you kind of see where the later move to try and set up a sort of think tank comes from, doesn't it? Yeah, this is just like a really strange
The only thing that
piece
separates
of,
this from being really stupid sentences is that they've made them into pretty drawings.
Yeah.
But it fundamentally doesn't seem any more insightful.
Very strange sort of data moshing, isn't it? Let's put some...
I've done 3 phases where we could make Amsterdam into the whole of the population of the Netherlands as a circle.
Yes.
at a density the same as Los Angeles.
Yes.
First, we could start with a small circle and take away some of the towns, and then the circle could get a bit bigger, and then it could be all of it.
It could swallow the whole thing. Yes.
Here are 3 drawings.
This is the sort of the 90s Dutch analog to whatever sort of MBB consultancy report it was that gave birth to The Line in Saudi Arabia, isn't it? It's a kind of a curious piece of seemingly uncommissioned consultancy for a sci-fi overlord. It's fun.
But I don't...
What's the pretext?
What is he trying to say?
What's the pretext? Maybe it says in the actual list of projects at the back. Shall we get to the bottom of this?
Another diagram. This is the little area. If you put all of the Dutch population at Manhattan density, it would take up this small amount of space. If you filled the bottom third of the Netherlands at Manhattan density, it would have 290 million people in it.
Study for Air Alexander. What is Air Alexander? Project 1 million new dwellings by 2015. So it's some kind of blue sky future planning thing, but I do not understand the context of it. How could you build a million new dwellings by 2015?
But what does it even mean? I don't get what any of this means, really.
Yeah.
It seems meaningless. Anyway.
Let's not dwell on it. Because there's so many of these, I think we need to group them a bit to talk through them sensibly. And I think the way it makes sense to do it is there are 2 essays, there are 2 early projects in Paris, 2 late projects in Paris, a series of projects for new cities, and then there's a final essay called The Generic City. Maybe good to do a couple of projects, and then we can settle into the essays.
Yeah. Okay.
So there's a couple from the early 80s. There's the La Villette competition. This is a competition, one of these big competitions that happened under François Mitterrand, and which lots of people enter, and lots of the kind of paper architects who've been sort of knocking around, filling up the kind of universities of the 70s, and generally like being big sort of voices, but without doing an enormous amount of building. And like they all enter these kinds of competitions. In the end, it's won by Bernard Schumi. But the OMA entry for it, so it's a big site in Paris, which was formerly like a series of slaughterhouses, isn't it? La Villette?
It's a jumbo ex-industrial site.
Yeah, it was a series of abattoirs. Yeah, they kind of knock it down and they build this park. And so the OMA proposal is stripes, basically. Well, the proposal that wins is this is like one of the great kind of deconstructivism competitions. Lots of kind of deconstructivist entries for it. The one which wins is this Schumi one, which has a kind of whole series of different funny little pavilions, all of them individually sort of strange, like deconstructed forms on a kind of grid. And then the OMA one is stripes, lots and lots of stripes. And this is kind of the thing about kind of program in the abstract. What are the stripes? The stripes are, some of the stripes are literally like tennis courts and things like that, or they're trees planted on a grid.
Planets.
Yeah.
Some of them are planets.
Yeah. But it's a sort of, the diagram is like the diagram of a skyscraper that's been laid down flat on the ground.
Yeah, that's something he says.
That's the, and, you know, that is kind of legible a bit like that, this sort of funny horizontal stripy thing. Is it convincingly nice as an idea for a park? No. Is it kind of singular and interesting and unlike other proposals that you've seen? Well, somewhat. Like, it's a little bit like medieval strip agriculture or something.
Yeah, it's got a load of kind of 80s strange shapes in it. There's a ziggurat, strange bridges and things.
Yeah.
I don't know what the planets one is. It's full of like Saturn and Jupiter and things.
Well, it could be, I mean, you know, you have those like scale models of the solar system is a thing that you have in parks sometimes.
Not to scale.
Not in the model, no.
They really went to...
they made an absolutely massive model.
It was a jumbo day at the model making tree...
Yeah.
Selling little model tree place.
Yes.
They had a really good sale on that.
And they've done loads and loads of drawings. There's clearly like a huge amount of lots of interns on this one.
And I think they probably wanted to win it.
And they probably had a decent shout. I'm not sure where they placed on this, but yeah, I mean, it's not obvious to me that this is a worse proposal than Shumi's one. I guess it's a bit less flexible because his is mostly about this sort of grid of little pavilions, but then, you know, in between It's more adjustable. Whereas this, as a kind of figure, seems a bit fragile. Like, if some part of it's not working, everything is going to start breaking down.
I'm not completely sure I understand what all the shapes really are. There are a couple of big buildings on it, which are sort of fairly clear what they are. I think a couple of them are already there, right?
Yeah, there's some retained structures. I think there's some nice 19th century abattoir structures that have been repurposed.
These strips are meant to contain activities, but the activity seems slightly mutable.
Well, yeah, this is the thing of perfectly fungible program, right? Like, you can't just put any old activity into an arbitrarily defined very long strip.
And quite narrow. I don't know how big this park is, but I get the feeling that the strips, any of these things they do. This has got scale. So that's 50 meters. So they're maybe 10, 15 meters wide.
Yeah.
Which is quite narrow in a park.
I can't see it literally working.
How wide's a tennis court? A tennis court that on its short axis is sort of a bit squashed into them. And then what actually are they? So some of them are lines of trees.
Yeah. Well, I think they're sort of nebulously defined different sort of categories of park, aren't there? So you can have your sort of maze, or you can have your wild natural park, or you can have your French style garden, or you can have your gravelly park, or I think that some of the colours are those, and then some of them are organised fun of different kinds, like tennis courts, or not sure if they include crazy golf, but it's an obvious candidate, isn't it? I think there's also a canal is one of the is a kind of as found strip,
and then there's a grid on that of really deconstructivist little pavilions as well, which are large numbers of kiosks and things. There are 15 horizontally divided strips of playground, which are 12 meters wide.
Oh, funny, yeah. It's a funny one.
Nice diagrams.
Yeah, nice diagrams, lovely drawings. And
I'm looking at an image, and on this image it looks like it's nearly all hard surface, but it's very difficult to know what the different colours of paper are. And there's a big circle which has got little thin cones on it, which might be trees or bollards or something. And at this, they seem bigger because those are basketball courts.
Yeah, so they must be a bit wider, mustn't they?
Those seem quite big. I mean, the site's pretty big, isn't it? It's like 1 kilometre long.
No, basketball court is 15 metres wide, so they're lovely. These very liney drawings, aren't they?
Yeah,
pure, and then white on black, and then this one with just all of the vegetation, which looks like it's been snipped out of old etchings or something.
Yeah, I wondered if they photocopy. You know that thing where you can photocopy and then use acetone to transfer the toner onto paper?
Oh yeah, it might be that, mightn't it? Yeah. They look like they've been snipped out of old landscape etchings or something.
Then there's a short one-page essay which describes in essence what some idea about it, which is that it's, again, recapitulating this idea that it's kind of slicing program next to each other.
Yeah.
Making reference to the Downtown Athletics Club.
Yeah.
And it emerges that this is even more important than the idea of this section where you've got swimming pools and things on different floors.
Yeah.
Is magnetic for him as an icon. It's not just that the program is next to each other, it's also that the building is boring.
Yeah, on the outside.
Yes. And even on the inside, each floor is not very interesting. The thing is not very exciting, but lots of things put together, and that's kind of an interesting idea. Also, it's grumpy. He's also sour at not being able to do the stuff, and also sour at the amount of competitions versus the amount of action.
Yes. Well, I mean, everybody says that, don't they? There's a kind of comparative one. From a year later, they were asked to take on the master plan of the Expo, which was going to go on. This was being planned in the early 80s, but it was due to happen in 89.
What happened to this Expo?
Seems to have just not happened. I mean, all of the drawings for it are pretty cryptic, but if you go on the OMA website, you can at least find some which sort of show it in a bit of context and where you can vaguely understand what the proposal is.
I mean, there's exactly the same. The drawing that's in the book is the same one as the one on the website, except that it has taken where it is out. It's just the proposal. And he says, in essence, that there's a description of the kind of history of the project and these there'd been a previous proposal which was deemed too expensive, which was a sort of ring of pavilions around a park.
Yeah.
And there's all these different architects that brought in. And he's got his kind of gossipy chat of
I am Pays there. Oh, Mungus is there.
And he kind of like scuttles off and gets the Louvre.
Yeah. They're all on a boat together at one point, or
and there's got to be these axes of kind of linking it with the history of these things. And his proposal is that we just grid up the site. The city does nothing. Give each square to a country.
Yeah.
They seem to have got a lot of participating nations, judging by the number of squares. I think this is considerably more squares than there are countries in the world.
Yes.
Even if you include...
Yeah. Even if
you call the British Antarctic Territory and US Virgin Islands their own countries.
Yeah, that's something that doesn't look like the right number, does it?
Well, he says that countries can just leave them desert.
Okay, yes. Well,
he says it's politically important because the theme is brotherhood.
Ah, okay.
The important thing is that, he says, poor countries come. And his proposal is that poor countries can leave their area desert, and rich countries can build mirror glass cubes.
Nice, okay.
But
the other,
there's a theme in this urbanist section which is he's quite sort of free market capitalist. He wants the idea of like the state compulsory purchases an area, demolishes everything on it, and then you fill the whole thing with capitalism.
Yeah, but critically, you have to impose a sort of strange geometric figure, arbitrary figure as a constraint on top of it. And so here we've got square graph paper grid. Previously we had stripes. We're going to have various other ones. It's like laissez-faire within the bounds of a completely arbitrary, like geometric constraint, and all the excitement that arises from the battle between those two things.
Yeah, the good activities are sort of spending ones, aren't they?
Yeah, and then the other thing is he's like, let's have no walls. It just kind of bleed into the city. Although presumably there's some kind of is that the periphery going through the middle?
He says we should close it.
Oh, they'll just close it. Okay.
He says we should close it and force everyone to drive around the little roads to get back onto it.
Okay, good.
Like they're going to have no hierarchy in that they just take the whole site, grid it up, and give each square to a different group. That at least notion is what he says the proposal is in the book.
There's some quite fun...
And then there's a lot of
production associated with it. There's some crazy collages. These like really fun, you have your sort of abstract grid. These are very like reminiscent of the voluntary prisoners collages. We're still very much in the mode of those sorts of sort of slightly punk, provocative
even
collages.
More in a way, I guess 60s collages, which are also very like, modernist collages. You get the feeling that he didn't really think anything was going to happen of this, and that he didn't really
take the money.
Just take the money and run, right? Which might not have been a bad reading, because obviously nothing did happen.
There's a model where the grid looks like it's completely different scale. And then it's got, again, like a lot of sort of strange model shop ephemera. And I think the word for this is kit bashing, isn't it? It's like making kind of peculiar little, slightly John Haydock style building things.
I really feel like it could almost just as well have been, why isn't that a piece of Rivita? Why isn't
they should have?
It should just be bits of stuff.
I mean, they could just have the different pieces from the Monopoly board, couldn't they? So, like, where's the big boot? Could you literally do this? I think.
But obviously, this isn't designed to. Like, I don't think you go, okay, the solution to dealing with the problem that there's a giant road going through this is let's just demolish the road.
Yeah.
Because you wouldn't just have to close the road. You'd actually have to demolish it.
Yeah. Something about this doesn't quite add up. First and foremost, you've got to have the big site plan and you've got to develop a compelling graphical strategy.
Yeah.
And then
take the money and run away.
We could look at the new...
I think that's the manoeuvre, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it is.
Take the manoeuvre, run away and do something else.
Should we look at some of the other projects and then we can do the...
Let it wither on the vine. Sure.
And then we can do the
2 essays.
The essays, yeah. I mean, because I think it kind of naturally leads on, there are a series of proposals. These are all obviously like big urban spaces in Paris, but there are also some projects for new cities and new bits of cities.
I would say there's one project for a new city, which is a sort of new town on the outskirts of Paris.
Yeah.
Should we talk about that one?
Yeah, let's talk about this. So Milan-Sénart, a new town on the outskirts of Paris. And the rhetoric for this one is very, very...
It's funny.
Very funny, isn't it?
It's a real mixture of platitudes.
Yeah, it's like...
It's a mixture of platitudes and drawings that are similar to the drawings for the Expo, really, in their kind of vibes.
What a tragedy to have to build on such a beautiful bit of farmland.
And the platitudes are, yes...
It was heartbreaking, if not obscene, to have to imagine here a city. And then there's a photo of some big flat farmland with some power lines on it.
Well, I mean, I'm quite attracted to big flat bits of farmland, and I think that's kind of right. I don't think he's being insincere when he says that.
Yeah.
And imagining covering farmland with a new town is a bit heartbreaking, but you often have to do heartbreaking things if that's what you want. And then but that bit doesn't feel like the platitude. The bit that feels like a platitude is, in order to really build this new city, we've first got to take stock of what's there.
Yeah.
And what's there is some countryside and some villages. And we've got to kind of really embody those values.
There's also a motorway, a TGV line, a river, some existing villages. The strategy, in short, is then to define spaces where nothing is going to be built.
Yeah.
And that this all becomes a kind of figure ground exercise of let's make these voids, we're back to the void as this a big important word, we're going to define places where nothing is built. And then everything else will, this is it's kind of instrumentalizing this sort of like cynicism about the possibility of urbanism, We're never really going to be able to control the quality of what gets built in a place like this. So,
and we're not really going to design it. The design move is going to be that we are going to define zones.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing about his application of zones is normally, so we have here what he calls a Chinese figure, by which he means what I would normally call a character. It's a kind of diagram.
An ideogram.
An ideogram.
Yes.
Which consists of an arc and 3 lines and another line going down, like a Chinese character. And normally in, I guess, New Urban, if this was a Christopher Alexander proposal for a city, the black of the figure that makes up the character would be the city.
Yeah.
But here it's everything else is going to be laissez-faire, develop what you like.
Yeah.
And the black is going to be reservations of farmland or forest. The super dense city is going to be chopped up and it's notionally you're just going to have anything. I think it's partly because he likes dense cities next to farmland. It's a bit taking things from Berlin. We're going to save the good bits, but instead of saving the good bits, we're just going to build them. There's some strange things, like there's some really small pockets of development there's one tiny island of development in...
what's that going to
be? In fields.
Yeah.
That's the Chinese figure, as he calls it, diagram. And then there's kind of collages, which are...
There are some which are really like Blue Peter, stick a bunch of pasta to the paper, kind of.
There's this one. Okay, so this one is like... The proposal is that we fill...
The bits of city are conceptualized as they look like E. coli multiplying on a petri dish or something like that.
Yeah, you're just going to fill it completely full of slab blocks. And then he's got a kind of voluntary prisoners of architecture...
kind of strip.
Yeah. Going across it with primary forms in the different squares. And there's another one which has got kind of like brand names everywhere.
You've got all the brand names alongside the motorway. The different areas have a kind of specimen like housing type.
Do you think the people commissioning this ever got like galled or kind of wised up to the fact that he was just delivering them a load of nonsense? Or was it all just that we're just going to take this galaxy brain stuff?
What? Do you think that there was an emperor's clothes kind of moment?
No, I mean, I don't think there was, but like, presumably people were paying him to do this.
They're still doing loads of master plans. So
yeah, but are they doing these master plans?
No,
like,
I don't think
he also produces master plans which are like, okay, there's going to be are like master plans.
Yeah, master plans. No, I have no idea. Yeah, what the kind of reception of these sorts of things were. What do you think happened to this place?
I'd be very sure that it wasn't this.
Maybe they didn't build anything.
this feels a bit late for huge new towns. Isn't the energy at this point beginning to go back into the centre?
Yeah.
Aren't the new urbanists beginning to turn out to be right?
Yeah.
And that people actually want to live in cities. And
Yeah.
that the centres of cities are economically dynamic.
Yeah.
And that it's quite convenient to be able to walk around.
Yeah.
And that density has its value.
Yeah. No, I'm not sure.
And that endless sprawling suburbia actually possibly isn't the most economically vibrant and interesting.
Yeah. No, I think the heroic age of the Paris banlieue is very much over at this point. And there are others. There's one where he lumps in together two projects together, which are one called
Dolphins, Transferia.
Yes, Stad an de Strom and Transferia. Yeah.
So what's Strom? City and the something.
Stad an de Strom. Yeah, I don't know. A city on the so this one, these are very cryptically represented. They're two different projects.
The things he says about it sounds complete. He's got an essay which is full bleed, but perhaps they've tuned up the production by your one. My one, the crop is really bad throughout the book.
Yeah, they've made yours a bit bigger. I mean, mine is a bit chopped as well. Yeah. So it's mostly Transferia, this one.
Yeah.
But there's a little bit of Stad and where is there actually Stad an de Strom? There's actually no pictures of Stad an de Strom as far as I can tell. There's just pictures of Transferia.
But the way he represents Transferia in the essay, so there's some sort of like squiggly pen drawings, like naive, of kind of lines going into boxes and lines going all over things. There's the essay, and the essay is kind of like, what if? So there's all of this material moving around rapidly, and it's causing congestion. So what if we had a buffer zone where all the transport went in to something where the transport was really bad, but it was full of empty buildings, and all the material could get sort of stuck there, and then everything could stop there, and then you could have like a pipe going out that could go to towns.
Yeah. What if
Isn't that what he says?
It's sort of like, it's a kind of transport interchange, but what if the transport interchange became so sort of engorged?
It's like, what if all the motorways and shipping containers and things hit a point where the flow slowed down so much all the material dropped out?
Yeah.
It's kind of the metaphor.
But then what it actually is as a proposal is like...
I mean, what it is as a proposal in the book is some squiggly lines and very cryptic model photographs.
Well, yeah, there's this kind of model. There's, this model here. But then I'm not sure if this is Stad an de Strom, then... This one might be that. One of the ideas is basically getting the accidental space created by a bunch of intersecting motorways, taking that figure and extruding it.
Yeah, literally extruding it to an extrusion, which then has no detail.
Yeah, which is a kind of sort of insane-looking, supervillainish like landform. That's cool. So I think that's going on here. So this is Transferia, so that still seems to be this idea, this kind of... Yeah, you get all the intersection of all these things coming together, this kind of weird accidental figure, and then that is actually being extruded to make this crazy, this thing which looks like a sort of, I don't know, like a kind of abstract sort of sea anemone or something that's been extruded.
Yeah, in Dutch farmland.
Yeah, crazy. And then the idea is, wouldn't that actually be better? Over time, wouldn't that actually become the most intense urban experience
But isn't it all kind of meant to be like empty, pointless buildings?
Yeah, but in the best way. I think this is some kind of ideas project. They're presumably the government is thinking about this as a strategic... I mean, in the Netherlands, they think about long-term strategic kind of objectives and things, don't they? Or at least they did at this period in time.
But this proposal is unbelievably stupid.
Yeah, it would be pretty fun, pretty crazy. Be pretty crazy.
You know, some of the forms in the Paris one were... You know, if you look at Google Maps or stuff, you see things in the land.
Yeah.
And you're like, that's a really interesting shape. And it's a pig farm or whatever. Yeah. It's somewhere where they're preparing ground to dig out gravel or something. And it's this big spider form.
Yeah.
And he's just taking these sort of forms that are to do with paths on a landscape or things to do with agriculture and making them really prominent on the drawings.
Yeah. Yeah, draw a line around it and extrude it. It's lumped in with this project Stad an de Strom. I think it's a project for the outskirts of Antwerp, basically built on, and this is not in the book, but I think since it's kind of included but not included, it's a master plan for housing to be built on the sort of ring road.
While you're looking that up, I'll read a quote from this section.
Yeah.
Why not conceive vast, bastard cities, gigantic architectural accumulations, huge buffer buildings, urban outposts beyond the city? Urban obstacles that simply absorb all the flows, swallow the goods, the cars, the people, wherever they come from. Highways could suddenly terminate in them. They might be used to park cheaply, then take trains, trams, buses, or whatever survivors of more collective period to the centre, to transfer them to wherever. These buildings would be, by definition, most efficient in places where people least wanted to go. Both obstacles and facilitators using unexpected slack within them seemingly exhausted infrastructural spiderwebs, combining promiscuous access with cheap, almost Indian density. They would be places of infinite capacity for the absorption of bridge and tunnel people, and so on and so on and so forth. And that's the proposal.
Yeah.
What if we built cities that most closely resemble beggars waiting at cash machines?
Yes. So what is it literally? It's sort of big warehouse transshipment space, but made spectacular and chaotic.
Well, also he's got this idea that it's quite fun if, like, the roads, instead of going somewhere useful, just stop in the middle of nowhere. And there's that Ballard, Concrete Island.
Yeah.
What if everyone was just piled into?
It is Concrete Island, yeah.
What if everyone was rooted into a space you couldn't really escape?
Yeah.
It's just an intersection. Wouldn't that be cool?
This proposal, which doesn't really appear in the book except as a title on the page, is basically for that, as far as I can tell. So this is the kind of existing ring road interchange with this very exciting spaghetti junction geometry. And the proposal is to inhabit that in the most spectacular way possible. So filling the gaps with all sorts of kind of landscape stuff. There's a little stadium, mini stadium that's had its corner cut off. There's a floating bit of seemingly traditional dense urban programme, which is a kind of funny cake slice. There's what looks like an inhabited bridge. And then there's a bunch of slab blocks, which are kind of hovering, presumably on legs. And I guess it is a thing, you know, those sort of spaces right up against these mega roads. They're interesting, and like there are those funny moments. There's like that nice bit on the A12 where there are some little warehouse buildings actually in a traffic island in between the two carriageways of the North Circular, which is a nice little moment of urban intensity. Yeah, like Ballard's Concrete Island, the possibility of claiming those for some sort of strange late 20th century urban weirdness. Yeah, seems fun, seems compelling. Might not be very easy to do in reality, but...
But isn't there enough, like, urban weirdness anyway?
No, you can always have more. You could always have more.
Yeah, maybe that. I mean, I don't necessarily sort of...
I like this one. The one which isn't included, I think, is much more interesting than... Like, this is just too weird. The Transferia project.
The images in this section, I think, are rubbish. I think it's pants.
Yeah.
I think it's completely pants.
Whereas this one, at least, yeah, I can kind of understand what's going on. And yeah, there's some kind of on-ramp going through the middle of two slab blocks. Very, very sort of Chongqing, isn't it? Like,
if you got out, I think it wouldn't be very nice being a pedestrian in any of the zones, but zooming around on transport might be quite fun.
I mean, that's part of life as well, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Hello listeners, Editor Matt here. Just a quick note to say that the full edition of this episode is available now on our Patreon feed. It's only there that you can catch the boys discussing various parts of the rest of XL, including John Portman's speculative developments in Atlanta, the TGV station at Lille, a scheme for Yokohama, and an essay about Singapore. That full-length episode is available only for patrons. So please do consider supporting us on Patreon through the link in the show notes if you'd like to get access. But for now, we're going to jump ahead to the end of XL. I hope you enjoy.
And then from that, onto some blurry photos of traffic lights.
Generic city.
The generic city. So which is the essay which ends XL, which we did talk about on a previous bonus, maybe. It's a funny essay. In a way, it's a bit of a prelude to his more famous junk space essay, in that it is partly a kind of a satire on the best bits of it are really a sort of weird satire on the contemporary city. But he is, again, riffing, I think is the word, on things which people talk about in the 1990s. People talking about globalization, talking about the loss of identity. I guess, again, he's taking something like the genericness of the city as something which people worry about and turning that into something positive, imagined as an ideology.
Well, I'm not sure it is meant to be positive, actually.
I mean,
don't think this is a manifesto. I just think
positive
it's...
in the sense of like positively defined rather than as
existing,
as a sort of miasmatic, vague anxiety.
Yeah.
As if it were something which had a program of its own. The program is generic.
I mean, we could read any bit of this and you get a sense of it. It's got like number, point number, chapter and verse numbering. Population. The generic city is seriously multiracial. On average, 8% black, 12% white, 27% Hispanic, 37% Chinese/Asian, 6% indeterminate, 10% other. That's why it has come as no surprise to see temples between the slabs, dragons on the main boulevards, Buddhas in the CBD, Central Business District. The street is dead. That discovery has coincided with frantic attempts at its resurrection. Public art is everywhere, as if 2 deaths make a life. Pedestrianisation, intended to preserve, merely channels the flows of those doomed to destroy the object of their intended reverence with their feet. The city used to be the great sexual hunting ground. The generic city is like a dating agency. It efficiently matches supply and demand. Orgasm instead of agony. There is progress. The most obscene possibilities are announced in the cleanest typography. Helvetica has become pornographic. Well, if you say so. Like with junk, the object of saying this stuff...
No, it's like a kind of performance poem or something.
Yeah, and it's not... recognising it is sort of fun.
He likes to satirise other people's anxieties, and which often I think is a good thing to do, you know.
Yeah. And wind people up. And it's been incredibly successful at winding people up. People like with junk, and because of the way he sort of is so serious about himself in his presentation, people are kind of still arguing with this thing, which is like a joke 30 years later.
There are some good bits. I like the bit where he's like, every city has a waterfront even when it's landlocked, because it is a sort of observation. It's like a real observation that every city has a kind of rehabilitated warehouse district with upscale burger joint in it. It's like the
riverfront in Seoul, or at least the one that comes to mind, is where there was a big road and they dug a trench and put a water feature in it as a river. But my conclusion about XL is he has no proposal.
Well, I think his idea
is that he's got a proposal for big buildings, which is that you should put different things together in them.
Yeah. It's about, the generic city is sort of about the exhilaration of letting go of morality and just enjoyably inhabiting a landscape of cynicism. And he's not wrong. You know,
sure, that's enjoyable, but it's not a nice place to stay because
little craft beer, little smash burger, little walk by the waterfront.
His experience, as he points out in the front, is perpetually travelling.
Yeah,
and at the beginning of that essay, he says cities are becoming like airports. Well, if you're at constantly the place where you interface with the world is through travelling, and you're spending 320 nights a year in hotels, and you're just being ushered from place to place, it will feel like that. But actually, most of the world is quite real and quite immediate, and not like that. Most of the time, most people are at home in terms of where they're staying the night, and cities are not all the same. They are inhabited by quite different cultures. And the experience that he's enjoying is an enjoyable experience of a tourist, but it's not an enjoyable experience of a resident. And it's not a general experience of a resident. And it isn't really true of cities in general. It's like an experience of travel, or an experience of some interfacing in a city. It's an experience of being in going to a shopping centre, where the commerce is bringing together things in a sort of strange, well, you wouldn't do that if it was just someone deciding to make it all like that. And that's what the observation is about. He makes no claims that there's any proposal, really.
No, that's not what it's about.
He presents all his urban proposals, except possibly Lille's, in a way which is meant to make them look like cop-outs, I think.
Provocations. How much you can get paid for being provocative.
Yeah, not enough to stop you spending all the money and going bankrupt, and presumably having put all your time into... I wouldn't say he was putting all his effort into not having to lay off everybody.
And then that's actually not the end. There's one more project. There's a PS, which I don't think we need to talk about very much. It is a cool proposal. It's a sort of continuous plane library for a university in Paris.
Yeah, so you take the idea of you have, like from the Très Grande Bibliothèque, you have a big but smaller building, and then inside you have a continuous undulating surface, so that you never get to have a flat floor.
No, it just
you
goes
can
up.
just sort of meander around.
Yeah.
Rather self-limiting once you've said, no, you just don't get to have any flat floor.
You can get a flat floor in the whole of the rest of the building. I mean, it's inside an existing. How much flat floor do you need? It's already got loads.
I mean, you want flat floor for most of your program most of the time.
Well,
it would be great as a fun thing to go around.
Yeah, I think it'd be all right. I think there's some sort of semi-flat bits here and there. And that's it.
And that's SMLXL. And you can see why people don't often read to the end. The book sort of fizzles out.
But in a way, it's not like a beginning, middle, and an end type of book. It's meant to be a solid block of information. You're meant to be able to dive into it like a swimming pool, or more like a sort of infinity pool, isn't it? It's an infinity pool of atmosphere, image, data, something which you should be able to kind of paddle around in and kind of immerse yourself in a particular, very characteristic mental environment.
This is what I thought at the beginning, and it's what I think now, having read the whole thing. I think it's a work of propaganda for, like, towards new architecture or something, but it isn't a work of propaganda for a method of doing or a style of architecture. It's a propaganda idea for what is a clever and cool architect. And a clever and cool architect is a ironic but deeply intense flaneur person who stands at a distance from things and says everything you know is nonsense. You just got to believe me and my weird diagram.
Yeah.
And then can use that on the one hand to sell buildings that are infused with interest and wonder, or maneuvers that are about creating wonder, which I'm very much behind. Creating I don't think he managed to land the thing of programmatic intensity being something interesting, but creating things where you move through, or spaces, shapes have interesting relationships to each other.
Yeah.
You go into a big void, or you're on legs in the sea or whatever. Or he can use it to sell nothing, really.
Yeah.
Nonsense.
Yeah.
It's just selling himself. And the thing that was incredibly powerful was this idea of this cool guy, I think.
Yeah.
Like this thing of spouting stuff that, like, all the stuff you're neurotic about, you shouldn't be neurotic about it. You just don't understand it.
The sort of globe-trotting, cool guy, mega brain, sort of consultant rock star consultant. There is this sort of funny I don't think I'm just imagining this kind of contretemps between him and William Gibson, but in Gibson's late trilogy of contemporary novels, the Zero History trilogy, there's this figure that kind of hovering. This sort of the kind of guru figure in it is this guy called Hubertus Big End, who's a sort of globe-trotting brand consultant and general sort of, I mean, there's a bit of Karl Lagerfeld in there, but I think he's mostly like a Koolhaas kind of caricature. I wonder if it's worth, it's definitely worth reading them if you haven't. They're quite fun. He's sort of mystic, incomprehensible, and like deeply connected to an otherwise imperceptible like zeitgeistiness. He sort of pops up like a sort of genie from a lamp into the lives of the various characters at various points. I'm putting that out there anyway. I think that's Koolhaas.
But the trouble is, once you've created this image, you just don't need another one of these.
Yeah.
Once you've read one, that's enough.
Yeah.
The 90s is over. Once all the ideology is dead, how can you get so wound up about the ideology?
The allure of the Koolhaas image is that you can sort of simultaneously be like critical, ironic, it's sort of deeply politicized in one sense, and also detached.
Do you think deeply politicized?
Yeah, like with a deep kind of political awareness. He's certainly not naive about any of it.
No, cynical.
But also,
but cynical to the point of like,
also nothing moves you. Also, like, cool. Also, at some level in it for the money, Like,
but I don't think he is at all. Like, I think he...
But like very relaxed about the dirty side of the business.
Yeah, he likes the dirty side of the business. It's a bit... The attitude towards money feels a bit like
he's not personally...
Andy Warhol.
He's not personally...
Actually, he's loves the idea of money.
Yeah.
But...
doesn't really care about making it
but
himself. But he loves...
He doesn't understand it.
He loves the bit like the business heads, you know.
Yeah.
He loves the chairman of the board. He loves Raymond Hood. He loves John Portman.
But he doesn't actually understand business. And he doesn't actually understand...
No.
That's not his world at all.
No.
He likes the allure of it, but he doesn't really understand what these people are doing all the time.
Yeah.
He can see the ease with which they put these messages out.
Yeah.
He can see their facility, but he can't see what it is that they're doing to make money. I don't think he's into like the process by which money is made.
No, ultimately he's like an eternal student as an actual form of life. But anyway, I think that we can kind of draw to a close on that. We'll maybe wrap up some loose ends in some kind of bonus or not if we've completely run out of energy.
Yeah.
We're going to do something different, obviously.
Yeah.
Next, the method that we sort of impose on ourselves of having to talk about the whole book, it's always interesting. There's a lot of stuff in this I haven't paid attention to before. Do I like those things? I'm not sure, but I definitely know about them now when I didn't previously.
I think a lot of the stuff that's not enjoyable in this book would be enjoyable if it was consumed on its own. But the process of putting it together, it's just too much of the same thing.
And if you are struggling to get to grips with anything in the book, I recommend, as a first step, my method, look them up on the OMA website. They're mostly much easier to understand at that point.
Yeah, I haven't done that.
Yeah.
I haven't been doing that in general.
No. You've committed to the method.
Yeah. I'm trying to figure it out from the book, and you can.
Yeah.
You have to read all the text.
Yeah.
And pass it.
Yeah. Yes. But I've cheated, and I think cheating worked for me.
Except you then go, no, it's much more obvious. It's not that squiggle. It's this squiggle.
Yeah.
I've cracked it. It's this banana-shaped spatty thing.
Well, I mean, at least I've kind of... When I say I've cracked it, I think I understand what the actual proposal was.
Yeah, not as in what he was proposing people should do, but what he handed over.
Yeah. What's on the drawing?
What they paid for, yeah.
Yeah, what did they pay for? This is what they got for their money. Yeah, that's enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, all right. Thanks very much.